Good afternoon. I'm Ian Hamilton and I lead CEDA's research program on public interest technology. I'm excited to welcome you to CEDA's live stream event, Australia's Digital Future, Evolving the Consumer Data Right. CEDA acknowledges that today and every day, we are on Aboriginal land. Committed to recognition and reconciliation, we respect elders and we support their stated aspirations. CEDA's Public Interest Technology Research Program is about how emerging technologies can be designed, developed, and used in the public interest. And the consumer data right is an example of this in practice. Data and emerging technologies used appropriately and in the public interest have the potential to deliver significant benefits in Australia in how we engage with both government services and in the goods and services that businesses provide. We are pleased to bring this discussion to you today in the context of the federal government's vision for Australia to be a leading digital economy and society by 2030. Please feel free to join in on the conversation on Twitter by using today's hashtag, which is Consumer Data Right, and tagging CEDA_news. Today, as at all CEDA events, you can interact through our Q&A portal, which is available via the link on your screen. Or you can enter in the details by going to ceda.pigeonhole.at and using the passcode Consumer Data Right. Using Pigeonhole, you can post your own questions and vote on the questions by others. You can put forward your questions at any time and the panel will endeavour to answer as many as time permits. Now, I'd like to thank and acknowledge our partnership with RSM today. Conversations and discussions like these are only possible with the collaboration and exchange of information and ideas. RSM are experts in CDR compliance, in particular the information security obligations, having supported the accreditation for over 50% of the current FinTech accredited data recipients. With that expertise in mind, I'm pleased to be able to hand over to Darren Booth, RSM's National Head of Cybersecurity and Privacy Risk Services, to moderate today's discussion. Over to you, Darren.
Thanks, Ian, and welcome everyone to hopefully what is going to be an interesting conversation over the next hour. With us today, we've got the Senator, the Honourable Jane Hume, who's the Federal Minister for Superannuation, Financial Services and the Digital Economy. I'm really looking forward to hearing from her in relation to the update in relation to consumer data right. Following the remarks from the Minister, we'll have the Scientia Professor Ross Buckley from KPMG Law, KWM Professor of Disruptive Innovation at UNSW. We've also got Sarah McNamara, Chief Executive of the Australian Energy Council. And finally, but not least, is Matthew Zaina, the Chief Operating Officer at Zepto. I think for us, with the announcement recently in relation to the adoption of most of the recommendations in relation to the future directions of consumer data rights, and also the recently released Strategic Outcomes Report, which is rolling out consumer data right beyond open banking into energy, telecommunications, general insurance, superannuation, and the non-bank lending. I think it really is an exciting time in relation to that rollout for consumer data right over the coming years. And really it's around the various industry sectors now trying to get themselves ready in relation to adopting and embracing CDR for the consumers that are out there. With that, I'll hand over to the Minister for her comments.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Darren. I'm so very pleased to be able to join you today to talk about Australia's digital future, and in particular the pivotal role that the consumer data right will come to occupy, both for individual consumers and also the businesses who serve them. The Morrison government has set a goal and is rolling out a plan to be a top 10 digital economy and society by 2030. A top 10 digital economy and society means more choice for consumers and more competition to provide those choices. They're very traditional liberal principles and they're driven by modern technology and modern digitally enabled insights and analytics. It also means agile businesses that can respond to consumers in a timely way and adapt to their needs. In a top 10 digital economy and society, Australian skills and innovation and creativity will result in product offerings and job opportunities that we haven't even conceived today. And most importantly, for the next generation, a genuine digital economy and society has at its very heart safety, security, and something that reflects our national values. So my message to businesses is the best time to digitise was probably 2 years ago, and the second best time is. And the prize for an economy that really leans in to digital transformation is absolutely enormous, but it doesn't and it won't happen by accident. And that's why the Morrison government's digital economy strategy, which was announced in May 2021, is a living, breathing strategy that will evolve over time just as technology itself evolves. The Morrison government has already made significant investments in Australia's digital future, things like getting those foundational pillars in place through skills development, through the $1 billion Job Trainer Fund, the $4.5 billion NBN upgrade, 5G readiness, 6G readiness, our $1.67 billion cybersecurity strategy, things like the new payments platform that facilitates real-time payments, and most importantly, for today's discussion, the CDR. We're driving the development and the uptake of high-value and emerging technologies like AI, quantum, Internet of Things, blockchain, and data analytics. And we're getting the settings right and cutting red tape to encourage the private sector to take up those technologies. We're also pursuing initiatives like the Australian Data Strategy, which unlocks government-held data for powerful new use cases. The Digital Government Strategy, which includes a commitment for every single government services to be available online by 2025. Through modernising Australia's payment system to capitalise on new payment and blockchain technologies, and also launching the National Artificial Intelligence Centre with CSIRO's Data 61 as part of our AI action plan, which cements Australia's position as a world leader in AI research and development. And also by expanding the consumer data right, Australia's world-leading data portability system right across the economy. Within government, we're also practicing what we preach. Already around 6 million Australians have taken up a digital identity, which will be the catalyst to so many more safe and secure and verified digital exchanges. Think of opening bank accounts or buying a home, renting a home, submitting a tax return, starting a business, applying for welfare, getting married, losing a loved one, applying for licenses, everything from driving to fishing. Anything you need to be able to identify your identity, verify your identity for. It's a secure and convenient way, and it will soon be ubiquitous. Our prosperity depends on Australians being able to be empowered to build the businesses of the future and grow them right here in Australia. And it's those businesses that will create the highly paid jobs and allow our living standards to be maintained and improved. And all of this job creation, this service improvement in living standards and innovation hinges on one factor above all others, and that's data. Data is to the digital revolution what oil was to the industrial. It's an essential, it's a commodity, it's a security issue, and it's an enormous opportunity. Digital technology is clearly creating and making it easier to use much larger amounts of data. But someone has to be held accountable for that data, to set the standards, to protect it, and also to grasp the opportunity provided by it. And that's why I want to spend most of my time with you today discussing the consumer data right, which over time is something that is likely to drive change as far-reaching as in the Australian economy since the dollar was floated. The Morrison government believes that consumers should be at the very centre of the data paradigm. And that's why we've established the consumer data right, a world-leading, whole-of-economy approach to data, standardising protections, promoting interoperability, and simplifying service provision. It's essentially the infrastructure or the pipes for a safe and secure sharing of data as directed by the consumer that it's created for or collected from. The consumer data right gives consumers and businesses the capacity to tap into and use their own data in a way that was either impossible or overly complex or fraught with privacy and security issues in the past. Data can be very difficult to access. It can be hard to make sense of, and it can be complex to use. And anyone that's ever genuinely tried to compare their actual banking or insurance, or superannuation or utilities data to other product offerings that are out there can attest to this. It's not a simple or seamless or accessible process. There have been some offerings that band-aid over this need. Many of us have agreed to a practice known as screen scraping or have felt the need to share passwords, an obvious online safety risk. And the consumer has less control over what and how their data is used. Significantly, audit and deletion rights do not realistically exist in this model. Price comparison services have existed for a while, and don't get me wrong, some of them are absolutely terrific, but they're not often personalised. And as a result, you tend not to be able to compare apples with apples. And creative product bundling, well, comparison systems in their current form simply customers deserve, and now all of this. It will make a bit easy and safe. The CEDA, in its essence, shifts the balance of power from the businesses who accumulate and hold our data back to generate it. It's your data. Now, that's a big change, and it will take some time before we've fully exploited the power of that shift, but it has already begun. We've started with open banking. Open banking is now up and running, and I want to thank those banks and financial services that have worked tirelessly alongside government to deliver these benefits to their consumers. Next will be the energy and the telecommunications sectors, which will safely add to the richness of data available to individuals about how they spend, how they consume, and how they go about their daily lives. More recently, I announced the move into open finance, which leverages the successes in open banking. Benefits to consumers have the potential to extend across those industry verticals. It's not just about sector product comparison anymore at all. It's about having the ability to optimise your life or your business based on your actual data and insights drawn from an increasing number of data sets across the economy. Businesses, you in the room today, I'm very pleased to say that you are all on the journey with us. The evolution of the consumer data right has been a genuine partnership with business, with peak bodies, and with consumer groups. And once again, let me thank you all for your participation and the work that you have undergone to tirelessly get through this process. The consumer data right may be a Morrison government initiative, and indeed, by its complex and comprehensive nature, it has to be something that's government-led, but it's the foresight and the fortitude of the private sector that will make the consumer benefits a reality. Over the next few years, we will grow the consumer data right in the sectors I've mentioned, but also in other ways that will deliver value to consumers by connecting data sets that extend beyond the broader finance sector, open finance and beyond. For instance, eventually the dashboard on my phone will give me the right insight to be able to switch power providers. It will show me how to finance installation if I opt for rooftop solar panels, or it might be also how to insure that. And that will all be based on my usage, my preferences, and my data. It will be seamless, it will be cost efficient for consumers, and it will be cost efficient for businesses also. Key to further growing the consumer data right is reducing the hassle and enabling flexibility. For example, allowing consumers to safely share their data with more third parties in ways that suit them. That means accountants, lawyers, financial advisors and other professionals can become part of the system, add their expertise to data analysis and analytics and decision making, and enhance that client experience. For smaller companies or for startups, we're accrediting participants who can provide pret-a-porter CDR solutions, CDR in a box, to speed up the process of aligning IT systems and meeting accreditation requirements. Uptake matters. Flexibility and encouraging voluntary data and voluntary entry, I should say, into the CDR market is the fuel to ignite innovation. To let 1,000 flowers bloom, we need more seeds in the ground in the form of small business uptake. And as with all new paradigms, besides the immediate benefits to current businesses, the creation of the CDR has acted as an incubator for the creation of a whole range of regtech businesses, companies that are in the business of reducing the cost and the burden for the data holders to meet their obligations, and leaving more time for data holders to seize the innovation opportunities that it offers. We're seeing a switch from compliance to innovation happening already, with several such as CBA and National Bank, Regional Australia Bank, and the Police and Nurses Limited becoming accredited. And I'm so excited to see more and more businesses added to that list of accredited data recipients all the time. We're seeing the majors invest in startup businesses to supplement their operations, like CBA taking a 20% stake in the business payment facilitator, Paperplane. And there's already a strong flow of CDR data in the banking sector where consumers can use their personal data to switch banks, to take out a loan, to apply for a new mortgage, or to add new financial management tools like budgeting apps to their armoury. As the CDR expands from banking into related financial fields, including general insurance and superannuation and the broader non-bank lending sector, there will be a substantial change to the way that consumers can use their existing data to make better choices about the financial services with which they engage. So where to next? Well, the inquiry into future directions for the consumer data right had 100 recommendations to expand the functionality of the CDR beyond any comparable data portability framework anywhere in the world. And we're taking steps right now to implement 94 of those recommendations. Each one will enhance the utility or increase the security of the CDR in action. Now, particularly noteworthy are the reforms that will expand the CDR beyond the consumer data access regime to a regime that enables consumers to instruct trusted and accredited third parties to take actions on their behalf. An active rather than a passive scheme. Now, as we all know, it's one thing to use your data to find a better product or a better service, but it's another thing entirely to take all the steps to sign up to a new provider. Imagine how less sticky, say, a banking product might be if you could switch all of your direct debits when changing banks with just the touch of one button. Well, there's no denying that, as with any new system, there was an intense upfront build phase to put the rails, the guardrails, if you like, and the rules in place and the processes into place before the benefits of the new way of working are adopted by the marketplace and felt by the consumers. But now, as we move into 2022 and 2023, consumers will begin to see the real and tangible benefits in the ease of comparing products and switching between them. They may not be aware that by using their banking data in a savings or budgeting app, or by spreading their bill payments more evenly, they're actually using the consumer data right, a key piece of new data infrastructure whose creation was initiated by the Morrison government. And for younger consumers, my bet is that it will simply end up being the way that things are done. As the build phase shifts to a a user-driven phase, the consumer-centric design of the CDR, and indeed of the digital economy more broadly, will be fully realised. It will put Australia among the best in the world in data management and standards. As such, it's a key part of the Morrison's government's economic plan, contributing to Australian society becoming more financially capable and helping empower individuals and families and businesses to build and manage their own finances. It's a key part of the Morrison government's ambition to enable a dynamic, an innovative, and an adaptable economy, a true legacy for decades to come. A top 10 digital economy in society isn't just about bragging rights. It's about this generation and the generations to follow, living in a stronger and more resilient and more diverse economy, full of interesting and better and higher paying jobs, with a better and easier and more cost-efficient life, and the choices and chances that Australians expect and deserve. I couldn't be prouder to be a part of this transformation, and I couldn't be more excited as to what lies ahead. Thanks for allowing me to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, Minister. Really appreciate giving everyone the insight in relation to consumer data right and how it fits into the digital economy. I suppose there have been a couple of questions as you've been talking, so I hope you don't mind if we ask you some questions in relation to what some of the attendees have been thinking about as you've been explaining things. I think sort of one of the questions that's come to mind is really around the community concern to sharing data, and you touched on that in relation to some of the existing methods in relation to screen scraping. And how is government going to support and educate users on the benefits of CDR compared to those higher risk methods like screen scraping? And how is that going to occur from a government perspective, do you think?
Well, I think the government has a role to play, but I actually think the market has a large role to play here too. You know, we've been using screen scraping for a while, and I think people use it rather cautiously. We don't like giving our passwords away. It's not something that sits comfortably. I think the consumer, once they realise that they can still get the benefits from access to data without having to give away their, without the privacy concerns, they'll end up demanding from some of those service providers that currently use screen scraping that they switch to CDR. So I think that a lot of it will be market driven. But that said, the government does have a role to play in educating and advertising, if you like, the benefits of the consumer data right, what it is and how it can be used. But as I said, it's one of those things that I feel will never be recognised as a government initiative. It will be something because, let's face it, it required government to get the ball rolling. But it's the private sector that have really done the heavy lifting here alongside government to deliver the benefit to consumers. And I think that they too will start, whether it be banks or whether, in future it'll be the energy companies and telecommunication companies that make it clear to their customers that they can do that they can access their data and use it for various purposes. So I think that there's a sort of a triple whammy effect, if you like. Yes, government has a role to play in seeing the benefits and the safety features and the consents around the CDR. I think that the data providers and indeed the data recipients will also make some noise, but the market will eventually demand that those privacy and security measures are in place.
And I suppose sort of following on from that, obviously, and your comment, you said this, the uptake has been slow, and steady, I suppose. It is a marathon, not a sprint, and I think everyone who works in CDR is very aware of that. But what can be done to encourage organisations to embrace CDR and the benefits from it? Over and above, like you've already talked about, some of the market drivers. Are there other things that we can do to encourage others to get involved?
So it has been a slow burn. We knew that it was going to be. Open banking in the UK was, exactly that. It was a very slow burn until it actually introduced right access and initiation, which of course is one of the recommendations, one of the 100, well, a major component of the 100 recommendations from the Farrell Review. So we think that that will really add a lot of value to what can come out of the CDR. I think that some of the interesting product offerings that from the accredited data recipients will also make a splash. I know I've spoken before about AidaTree, who were really the first cab off the rank to use banking and consumption data, transaction data from banks, to match it to a different data set, which was the COVID hotspots announced by the about New South Wales state government, to match those so that you got almost in real time a notification sent directly to you to say, Jane, that you were in Bondi Junction and that was a COVID hotspot on Saturday, rather than you being contact tracked and traced through government, which took considerable period of time. You almost got as good as real-time notification, and it's entirely secure, entirely private. It wasn't the government didn't know where I was, I knew where I was. And that was because of the consents that I had provided, the app developed by AidaTree. So those interesting use cases, I think, will inspire people's imagination. There's more and more coming on every day.
And you may not have an answer to this, but I think it's a burning question for a lot of individuals is around the timing of when something like active initiation will come. Like I said, it was the burning thing that sort of really kicked things off in the UK. Is there any indication from government as to when that might be?
I could tell you, but I have to kill you, Darren.
Okay.
No, look, what I can say is that Treasury has commenced work on the planning and implementation of the government response to the Future Directions Inquiry. There's, as you would probably understand with the consumer data right, there is so much industry consultation built into all of our processes, whether it be designation, whether it be deciding what the rules are, what the frameworks are, and then implementation. Every step of the way is done in consultation and in conjunction with industry, and the future directions will be exactly the same. We want to make sure that we get this 100% right in order to instill trust and confidence.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I think everyone understands that. Everyone who we talk to is very aware it's not an easy thing to do, and therefore needs a lot of consultation in order to make sure it gets right. I hope you don't mind. I might just bring in some of the other panelists as well, just to bring them into the conversation and really just to explore their views around what some of the things you've talked about today. Ross, if I go to you first, you've done a lot of research in relation to consumer data right, and obviously a big advocate for it and the benefits that come from it. What excites you around CDR and what the ministers talked about today?
Thanks, Darren. Well, look, a lot of my research is international, and when I talk to people overseas about this, they're really surprised. Most jurisdictions, or a lot of jurisdictions, have open banking. The idea of extending the concepts of open banking right across an economy tends to take other people's breath away. And I think as Aussies, we're a bit, blasé or sceptical. I mean, I know the devil's in the details. The implementation, as the Senator has said, is going to be critical. But this is a really breathtaking concept in scope. And to be completely honest, it's not the sort of breathtaking forward thinking I'm accustomed to seeing coming out of government. So, and yet I think it's really important. The Americans are trying to do this through the private sector. And obviously this, to my mind, is a case where the frameworks need to be set by government. There's going to be a lot of rocky road if you try to get private sector to come together and navigate all these rails, as the Senator said. So I just think this is a really exciting initiative, and I think we Australians underestimate its impact a bit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's a massive benefit, especially when you start looking at it economy-wide instead of just the narrow banking side of things. So Sarah, maybe I'll go to you, because obviously energy is the next cab off the rank, so to speak. And then we have telecommunications has been designated as the one after energy. Given your experience of the consultation that you've had over the past couple of years in relation to the energy sector, and it's been designated and the rules, etc., that are being created in relation to it, what advice would you have for the telecommunications sector, and even as we start getting into some of the open finance subsectors that we were talking about earlier in relation to superannuation and insurance and non-bank lending. What advice do you think you have in relation to working with government on that rollout?
Oh, thanks so much, Darren. Well, we're kind of in the middle of the implementation phase here in energy. We had the CDR rules settled for our sector back in November, and we'll see large retailers begin to implement the CDR come this November in 2022. And if we could offer any advice to the industries that are going to come after us, it would be really to focus on the technical detail. Because there are two big challenges with this rollout as we see it. Firstly, the devil is very much in the detail. We come from, in energy, one of the most heavily regulated sectors in the economy, and our colleague sectors that are also going to be rolling out the CDR are not dissimilar in that respect. So certainly for us, a lot of effort and energy has gone into working with the ACCC and Treasury and our own market operator on how customer data is going to be used. So that technical detail is really important. And secondly, I think I would counsel other sectors and perhaps the government as well around the pace of the implementation. One thing we have found really challenging has been the pace. In energy, it does take a long time to adjust big, clunky customer data systems in a way that's going to deliver a positive outcome. We think we've got it right, and we're really excited about the rollout come November. But we note that the CDR rules are going to continue to get more complex as other sectors come online and they expand. So that compliance issue then becomes a challenge a little bit further down the track. So lots of work to do, but we think we're headed in the right direction.
Thanks, Sarah. And that's a very good point I think you make in relation to the technical side of things. And we can talk about sectors and the sort of the data that they've got, but ultimately it comes down to the nuances in relation to how organisations provide that data and then also get accredited to access that data. Matthew, you, obviously at Zepto, you are one of the accredited data recipients that we've got at the moment. From an accreditation perspective and the journey that you went through, what were the key changes you had to make to your business from what was already a successful organisation to then being able to get accredited for CDR?
Thanks, Darren. I think, like from our perspective, obviously the accreditation process is very much a governance framed process. And so from a tech perspective, obviously, because we are a tech business, we didn't really need to make massive adjustments there. I think what was really helpful through the process was effectively it allows you really to stop and take a moment to effectively assess your insurance obligations and the level of cover that you have, and then to look at the appropriateness of your policy structure and really look to uplift those where needed and introduce other others that potentially aren't there. Also, what was really useful is really having the review, Darren, that RSM took out for us in the InfoSec audit. So we obviously, are very focused on the architecture and the structure of our system, but to have someone independent coming in and really looking at that and pulling it apart from an InfoSec perspective was very useful.
Okay, thanks for that, Matthew. And Minister, if you don't mind coming back to yourself, there was a question here in relation to the benefits of consumer data rights. And we talk about the multiple sectors, and we talk about sort of consumers accessing data, and how's government measuring the benefits in relation to both the spend, I suppose, and also how many, what that return on investment is in relation to the amount of money that's being spent both by the various areas and sector and the private side of things, but also on the government side.
So I'm acutely conscious of the fact that whatever the government has spent on the development of the consumer data right pales into insignificance when you compare it to the amount of money that the private sector has spent. And there really hasn't been able to, I don't think, from our perspective, we can possibly at this stage measure consumer benefit compared to what's been spent, because really we haven't seen it come to full maturation yet. But we're now beginning to do so. We haven't sung, as I think I said, the the praises of the consumer data right from the rooftops for a number of reasons. One is we wanted to make sure that it was 100% right. You know, we wanted the coverage to be as broad as it possibly can be, and I think now around 98% of banking customers can access the consumer data right, which is terrific. It's not just consumers, it's also small businesses, so there's more benefit to be gained there. And with each sector that comes on, the benefit will grow, and as will the implementation of the future directions recommendations. So it's kind of hard to measure right now, but we know that it's there. And I think that, you know, Ross made a really good point. When you speak to overseas jurisdictions and counterparts, they really are blown away by what it is that we're doing here and the potential for it. From my perspective, the real benefits are the fact that so many new businesses, innovative ideas are coming into the sector and finding terrific use cases for that data and providing consumers with, you know, products and services that at the moment we can't even imagine, but, you know, there will be more and more of them, but they're, you know, better and, you know, more cost effective, but, you know, also will actually just make life better. You know, this is all about a sort of standard of living that we expect in Australia. But there's also a really exciting opportunity for job creation here too. Those companies are employing people. It's a whole new generation of innovation that's now entering Australia, and it's an attractive prospect for people that want to come and work here from overseas as well. So I think that the benefits of the consumer data right are really hard to measure, particularly right now. But I know that they are. It is going to be one of those foundational pillars, if you like, of the digital economy in Australia, from which we're going to see an awful lot of economic benefit.
No, that's great. Well, thank you, Minister. And Ross, following on from the Minister's comments there, you know, obviously there's been a lot of talk from an industry perspective in relation to action initiation, and that being potentially the trigger that brings those benefits that we're talking about. From your perspective, how important is action initiation to the long-term success of CDR?
I think it's really critical, Darren. I mean, you know, if I was drafting the regime, which didn't fall to me, I would have had it come online earlier. I mean, I can understand the political caution, but I think where it really will show up is less in banking, because changing your bank provider can never be a really simple thing. But changing your energy provider, or changing your telco provider can be a pretty simple thing, right? Your bank, you've got home loans, you've got mortgages and things. So with action initiation, you know, somebody can have a telco plan, a mobile phone plan, can get a comparison of what they'll be paying under a new one, and then click a button on the email that's sent them or on the website and switch providers. And that's going to be really important for the consumer. It's also going to be important because it's going to stop this loyalty penalty behaviour we see in Australia. You know, at the moment, new bank customers get better home loan rates than existing bank customers. You know, a lot of situations, it's the long-standing customer who doesn't shop around who pays more. Well, with consumer data right in place, with action initiation, businesses will have to put their front foot forward because they won't get a chance to claw those customers back when they come to say, I want to move to a different provider. The customer will be gone as a result of action initiation. So I think it'll actually see a sort of what I'd term an improvement in commercial behaviour, in fairness.
No, great. I think no one can deny the fact that action initiation is going to be potentially that game changer in relation to use cases, both from allowing consumers to actually get that benefit, but also bring on applicants as well, or accredited organisations to want to use that as a function, provided obviously there's the right safeguards in place to enable that to occur. Sarah, obviously we've talked a lot around sort of some of the implementations, and really when it's being implemented, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. It really is that implementation is where the final details are. What sort of crossovers are you expecting to see in relation to energy, telecommunications, banking? How do you see it rolling out from that whole of economy perspective to actually allow consumers to get benefits instead of it just being focused on one particular sector?
Thanks, Darren. I think in the short term, it's very much going to be just focused on energy and energy customers. And I understand Ross's point about the concern re-switching energy accounts and customers that might be on the default market offer, which is a higher offer than anything competitive in the market. I think the challenge, though, for the consumer data right is that it's not necessarily going to be a silver bullet for disengaged customers out there at the moment. Because at the moment, a disengaged customer can pick up the phone and call their retailer and switch on to a cheaper market deal if they're willing to do that. It will take some time for the CDR's kind of pipeline of data, I think, to be able to support and assist those kind of customers as well. And we welcome the CDR's contribution to that. But in the medium term, I think the use example that's going to be really interesting for the CDR is perhaps customers that have more complicated challenges. For instance, if they're moving into a home with solar panels on their roof and they want to work out what the best electricity retail deal is for them, perhaps bundled in with a broadband deal as well. And the CDR, it's quite easy to imagine, will present a really easy pipeline of data for a third party to be able to provide a new customer with some pretty simple choices to make to enable them to save money.
Great. Okay, thanks, Sarah. And by the way, everyone, just a quick reminder, if you do want to ask any questions, please jump on to the Pigeonhole website, .pigeonhole.at, and then the passcode you've got there is consumer data right. All right, so another question we've got come in, Matthew, in relation again to the rollout, and obviously your organisation is very focused on the payment side of things, and Ross has obviously already talked about the action initiation, and if you focus very much on the payment side of things and the rollout of how you integrate or hope to integrate consumer data right with the MPP, how do you see that playing out over the next coming years, and what sort of organisations and opportunities is that going to open up, do you think, for CDR and the benefits from consumers?
I think, as the Minister said earlier, effectively we're just at the early stages of CDR and understanding what the benefits are to merchants, but also I do agree that it will really be driven by consumers. And so from our perspective, we see obviously action initiation as being critical because it just really removes a layer, within the payment chain that is not needed to be there effectively and makes things more efficient. Like our business obviously is, it's built around real-time payments and open banking. And so the evolution of the open banking framework is critical to that real-time payment, experience for consumers, which will be delivered by the MPP.
Thanks, Matthew. Ross, back to you, and again, sort of looking back on the sector side of things, and obviously the Minister's talked today around the expansion that we've got going on into energy, telecommunications, superannuation, insurance, non-bank lending. What's next from your perspective? Where would you like to see CDR go to next? Is it e-commerce? Is it big tech? Are there other sectors that you think are ripe for this type of data sharing model that you would like to see government focus on once we get through this tranche of the next sectors?
That's a good question, Darren. I'm so excited about where we're going. I mean, I think insurance is going to be a really big one. I think we've got a bit of an insurance crisis in Australia at the moment. Premiums are just becoming unrealistic in a lot of sectors, I think. So I think CDR coming through insurance will make a really big difference. Anything that is data heavy, data driven, like financial services, like insurance, like energy, like anything like that, it will be really transformed by this. I don't think our economy at the moment is characterised by that much competition, to be honest. A lot of our sectors, we only really have a couple of major players servicing that sector. And CDR will change that. I think you'll find small, innovative companies really starting to get on the bandwagon because they'll be able to offer customers individualised alternatives. with CDR, if you as a consumer direct your data to that company, they'll be able to say, this is what you've paid in the last 12 months, and this is what you would have paid if you were with us. And it will be comparing, as the Senator said, apples with apples. It's going to be a big journey. To get it to insurance, for instance, we're going to have to standardise quite a few insurance terms. You can't have CDR applying to flood risk unless you can agree what a flood is. And the industry seems to have a lot of trouble working out whether a flood comes from above or below, and is it a storm, is it a flood? A lot of standardisation is going to have to go on, but the net result of that will benefit an awful lot of people, I think.
Darren, can I add?
Of course, can.
Yes, because, I have a real vision for what the CDR might be able to do, not necessarily in the next 2 years or 3 years or even 5 years. But putting on one of my other portfolio hats, obviously I'm Digital Economy Minister, but I'm also the Minister for Superannuation. I'm excited at the prospect of what the Consumer Data Right can do in the retirement income space. Imagine if you're facing retirement, you're sort of knocking on the door of, 67 years old, and you can pull all of your banking data history, your consumption patterns and behaviours. You can pull all of your information about your energy usage, telecommunications usage. Imagine if you could get the data from your loyalty points, your travel behaviours, from, potentially some of your health data from a wearable device. Do you take the tram to work or do you ride a bike? Imagine if you could get some of the data from government sources, whether it be Centrelink or, I shouldn't say my centre, I don't think we call it Centrelink anymore, but, Department of Social Services and, the ATO. Gather all of that data together and have a really rich picture of what an individual's life looks like. Hand that to a product manufacturer that creates retirement income products that address not just investment risk and inflation risk, but also longevity, for instance, that can build you a bespoke retirement income product that will essentially guarantee you an income in a cost-effective and efficient way with the flexibility that you personally need from the day you retire to the day you die. I think that's a really exciting opportunity and something that I'd imagine superannuation funds are already beginning to turn their minds to as part of their contribution to the CDR and what also they will begin to take out of it.
Yeah, look, I think definitely the opportunities are massive. Minister, what do you think might be the key couple of things that might stop Consumer Data Right from being successful? I think we've already touched on a number of these already, so by all means, it might just be reiterating those. But obviously we've got the consumer side of things and the education. We've got the adoption from accredited recipients actually getting on board. We've got the buy-in from the sectors in relation to their preparedness to invest and be part of CDR. Where's your biggest concern?
I've got a couple of concerns. One, I think, is on compliance. We want to make sure that the accredited data providers don't just provide the data, but they provide it in a timely manner, make sure that that data is entirely accurate. And we're trying to put our heads around now how we can essentially sort of sandbox the consumer data, right, in a way that we can test to make sure that the data is coming from it is 100% spot on and in a timely, so that new entrants into data recipients can test their business models and see whether there is some consumer value there. So compliance, I think, is one issue, but not an insurmountable one. Something that we have already turned our minds to. I think that genuinely privacy concerns will they'll be front and centre, but when people understand that part of being an accredited data recipient is abiding by the rules about destroying data after a particular period of time. In fact, one of my staff members just this morning, received an email from an organisation with whom he had shared his data saying, the time is up now. We're going to destroy this data today unless you tell us that you want us to keep it on. So I think that's a great thing. You don't get that in a screen scraping environment. You could offer your passwords 2 years ago to somebody that's screen scraping and they've just disappeared into the ether and you don't know who's got it and how long they're going to keep it for. But I think that there'll be a level of comfort in the Consumer Data Act that is, really encouraging. But there are always privacy concerns, I think, when people share their data. What else could stop it? Look, it is a complicated process, making sure that we set the right standards and the right rules. I think the rollout, we've taken our time on this one on purpose, but at the same time, we want to see that consumer benefit happen as quickly as possible now. But I don't think there's all that much standing in our way other than imagination. I'm really looking forward to having those accredited data recipients really expand their horizons as to what it is, what products, what services that they can offer.
Thank you for that, Minister. And Matthew, you're accredited. What do you think is going to prevent your uptake in your organisation and on the rollout for your consumers to start using CDR?
I think, as the Minister said earlier, it's really down to consumer awareness and understanding and their level of comfort, with sharing the data. And I almost view it as, it's when and not if the CDR is going to be successful, because the benefits are just almost incalculable. Even when you look initially at the open banking to start with, but then, as the speakers talked about the evolution into the other industries, just the innovation, the speed, the cost savings, the efficiency, it's really, it's going to deliver such a benefit for the consumers. And so from that perspective, I already think it's almost inevitable.
No, I agree. I think it will get there eventually. I think this is definitely a marathon, and like the Minister sort of said, it's not this year necessarily. It's sort of, the coming of as this all gets built upon the infrastructure investment that's been made, how it actually can sort of exponentially, hopefully, grow from there. Yeah,
and I think probably just add to that. The one thing holding it back is really the evolution of the legislation. When we started, we were basically in legislation round one, and the set of use cases that were allowed through those rules are relatively limited. And obviously, there's been another couple of iterations after that, and more to come. And so, as the legislation is more, and the government's doing an amazing job. We're heavily involved with speaking with the Department of Treasury around the use cases that we're seeing and that merchants are asking for, which is then feeding into obviously the drafting of the legislation. And so when you just expand the use cases and therefore the benefit that comes out of this framework, that's where we're really going to see the uptake take off.
Sarah?
Look, Darren, for our part in the energy industry, we see a couple of key challenges ahead. We are very respectful of customer data, as we need to be, and we require explicit informed consent when we're dealing with it. A challenge for the consumer data right is rolling it out in a way that continues to reassure customers we're protecting their data. And another roadblock is the other technical aspects to the CDR. If we don't get them right, customers won't in turn have confidence. But perhaps the biggest roadblock of all is going to be customer awareness. At the moment, we have pretty low customer awareness, but I'm reminded of what Henry Ford said before he produced the first motor car in America, which is if I'd asked customers what they wanted back then, they would have said a faster horse. And perhaps once we get the CDR rolling and people are aware of the benefits it brings and they can see the benefits, then we're going to get that strong awareness and that greater uptake. And that in turn is going to manage the really important issue of compliance costs for the different sectors, because with a low uptake, we're just not going to get the same scale and it's going to be infinitely more expensive to manage.
Yeah, no, Braden. Matthew, just on that uptake side of things, what would be your one piece of advice for any organisation looking to access CDR data? You've been through it now. You've lived and breathed both the accreditation and the interactions with government. What would be your one piece of advice?
I'd say planning and engagement. Really you want to go into this process with your eyes open. You need to have a good understanding of the legislation and really what controls and what the governance framework is there to protect. So you can then think about how that impacts your business. And key to that, Darren, is what we work together on is really understanding that information security issue. So very important as part of the CDR framework is looking at how the CDR data, potentially intermingles with non-CDR data just making sure you have a very clear understanding of that, because it can have, you know, major implications for database management. And then on the engagement, I think kind of linked to the planning, you know, if you just read the ACCC guidelines, they're sometimes not overly detailed or intuitive in terms of, you know, how to interpret and what that, you know, relates to your specific business. And so I'd just say, you know, engage in the industry. You know, we help a number of other people, you know, that are going through this process, you know, just giving them advice, giving them some explanation as to, you know, the process that we went through, and equally engaging with the ACCC. We did that in advance of submitting your application, you know, super helpful, just talk things through, you know, just ensure that your interpretation of what they're asking for is in line with what they're expecting, so you can just make that process just a lot more efficient.
Thank you. And Ross, final comments maybe from yourself. You know, open banking and open data and open finance, it's been rolled out in a number of different jurisdictions around the world. And, you know, you touched on earlier the fact that some of the international places you talk to are you know, excited about the breadth that we've got in relation to the types of sectors we've got involved. But given your conversation, what do you think we can learn from the other international rollouts that can help us in the future as we start looking at rolling out CDR into other sectors?
I think it's more the reverse, Darren. I think it's what they can learn from us. You know, I've just finished an article that is 6 lessons for Australian consumer data rights, 6 lessons for Europe, that's getting published shortly in the UK. I mean, you've got to remember, for instance, when the Brits rolled out open banking, it came off the back of PSD2 in Europe, the Payment Services Directive. So the data that was being shared was payments data. Well, that's not as powerful, for instance, in the banking context as mortgage data. Right, the big savings for people are cheaper home loans, and you don't really get that information that you need as a bank from payments data. So it's only now that the Europeans in the banking context are taking steps to start to get to where we started with banking, because we started with, you know, I think information of sharing on something like 27 different accounts, basically every sort of account you can have with a bank. In Europe, they started with sharing on 1 or 2 accounts. So we really are a lot further ahead here than we realise, I think. There's not many lessons yet overseas for us. The direction of lessons is the other way.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, hopefully there's many things for others to learn from us, and we ourselves will learn more and more as we go through CDR. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting thoughts and comments, and in particular, Minister, thank you very much for your time and providing the extra insights as part of those questions, none of which you were prepped for. So thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
Ian,
Thank you.
back to yourself.
Great, thank you, Darren. I'd also like to thank our participants today, Senator the Honourable Jane Hume, Professor Ross Buckley, Sarah McNamara and Matthew Zaina for sharing their insights and expertise. I'd also like to thank once again our live stream sponsor RSM and Darren Booth for leading this discussion today. Your ongoing support allows CEDA to continue to convene important conversations such as these on key policy issues. And to the audience, please take a minute before you log off Pigeonhole to provide your feedback and rank today's discussion. And finally, I'd like to thank the audience for your time and participating in today's discussion. Also, a reminder that this discussion has been recorded and will be available immediately via your live stream link and available on the CEDA website next week for you to share with your colleagues. Thank you again for participating, and hope to see you all soon.